Boys, today we are back, and in today's video, I'm going to be going over the news that broke this week about Dana White testifying in a UFC antitrust lawsuit that he is no longer directly involved in UFC matchmaking or fighter contract negotiations now. I'm going to preface this by saying, I'm not a Dana White hater. He's probably a fucking good guy. Outside of the UFC. I don't know. He had that one incident with his wife, but I'm not going to go into that. I'm not here to shit on Dana White, but, I have been critical of him in the past. And, this news that came out, it makes me a little less critical of him, but also at the same time, questions, what his job actually is in the UFC. And I'm going to get started right there. Dana White testified in the antitrust lawsuit that he's no longer in contract negotiations or UFC matchmaking, which is, I don't know if that's completely true, but he said that Hunter Campbell, ever since he was hired, Sean Shelby, Mick Maynard, ever since they were hired, they handle all fighter negotiations and matchmaking. When asked about the involvement in fighter contracts, Dana said less than zero. You won't find one manager on this planet who will tell you I've negotiated a deal in I don't know how long. Now, the first thing I thought when I saw this was, this explains why, this somewhat explains fighter pay. Now, do I believe this is true? No, I don't believe this is true. And why I don't believe this is true is because Dana White literally went on a Instagram Live, which I'm going to get into later, but he went on Instagram Live and he said the matchmaking for the UFC White House card starts this week and that he's going to be with the guys matchmaking the UFC White House card. So obviously Dana White has something to do with matchmaking. All right. Now, maybe it's not like a big portion, but obviously he's up to date with the matchmaking. Okay. Obviously he's in the war room with Hunter Campbell, Sean Shelby. Obviously he's in there with matchmaking. It's his company. Like, don't tell me for a second you don't believe, you believe that Dana White is being 100% truthful here. Obviously he's matchmaking, obviously he's in some fighter negotiations. I don't think he's in like fucking, I don't know, fucking Michael Aswell, like, for example. Like, obviously he's not fucking in the trenches, with Michael fucking Aswell going over his fucking schedule, but like, I don't believe for a second that Dana White's not in matchmaking, and especially with this UFC White House card coming up, him and Trump are best friends, so I think he is involved with, matchmaking at some point. But this is interesting. If this is somewhat true and Dana White has no involvement in matchmaking, this could, when people ask him about fighter pay and shit, this may be why he gets so upset. And maybe this is why he doesn't know much about, fighter pay. He tries to play it off like he doesn't, but maybe it's because he's not actually in there, not actually, listening to, these meetings happen and, not knowing, certain numbers. But also at the same time, it's like, it's your company. Like, so how do you not know about like big deals that are happening, with fighters' pay and fighters' money? So I don't know what to think of this. Dana White is a known fucking liar. He says he gives the fans the best fights. He's bullshitting. And I honestly think this is a lie. I'm pretty sure, he does have something to do with matchmaking. Obviously he has something to do with fighter contracts. Like, obviously, like he said the thing about Justin Gaethje. He said, I offered Justin Gaethje more money, but he declined. So if you're not part of, if you're not part of matchmaking and you're not part of fighter pay, how did you know Justin Gaethje was offered more money and he declined it? He somewhat declined it, somehow declined it. It said, just look at this quote. When asked about his involvement in fighter contracts, less than zero. How did you know you offered Justin Gaethje more money one day apart from when Justin Gaethje came out and said he doesn't, he should be making more money? How did you know a day later that Justin Gaethje was offered more money if you have nothing to do, if you have less than zero to do with, what I'm saying, with negotiating deals with fighter pay? So like, this whole thing's crazy. Dana White, genuinely I think is a liar because I don't believe a word he says in here. But I just wanted to bring up another point. What does Dana White genuinely do? If this is true, which I don't think it is, I don't think he plays a big part in the fighter pay stuff, like only with like the big top guys I think he does, but with the bottom tier guys I don't think he does. And with the matchmaking, I think he is involved in the matchmaking, but if he's not involved in as much matchmaking and as much fighter pay stuff as we think, what does he do? Tell me, what does Dana White fucking do? The guy doesn't promote fights. He's not excited about anything anymore. What else? He doesn't care about the sport. He doesn't care about what the fans want. Shitty matchmaking. Did I already say that? Maybe, but Genuinely, what does this guy do? He just shows up for interviews and post-fight press conferences every week, and then fucking fucks off for the next week. Like, I'm not even trying to be a dick, like, but genuinely, what does this guy do to help the company at this point? I think Hunter Campbell should be promoted to, Dana's position. I think, well, if we believe this and we go off Hunter Campbell as the one matchmaking, his matchmaking's dog shit. So maybe he shouldn't be the one. But I think if Dana White ever does leave, it will be Hunter Campbell that steps up. Hunter Campbell's at every event. He was at the Sydney event. He was at the Apex event, the Bautista fight. He was at UFC 324. Dana wasn't at the Apex event or at UFC 325 in Sydney. So Hunter Campbell's going to every event. I remember he was at the Charles fight in Brazil. Dana doesn't go rarely anywhere international anymore. Unless it's like Abu Dhabi or Saudi or some shit like that. So I think Hunter Campbell should be appointed Dana White's position, because if what Dana's saying is true, what does he do? Like he obviously does shit behind the scenes, but as like a promoter, as like the face of the UFC, what he's giving to the fans is absolutely zero. He goes on Instagram Live and just announces fights, goes to post-fight press conferences, doesn't show up for the press conferences anymore. That's mostly John Anik, which I'm fine with. I'm fine with like a John Anik. Maybe like toss a Rogan in there and like see if it gets worse, but funny worse. Like Rogan is so fucking bad it's funny. Like maybe toss a Rogan as like the press conference guy and see if it gets funny, just because of how bad it would be. But I think John Anik would be a good spot for the UFC press conferences. I think Hunter Campbell, could do a better job than Dana White. Maybe he starts, announcing fights in a different way. What else? So, he'd be a new face at the post-fight press conferences. Someone that actually, feels like at least has, some like love and some, wants to make the sport better. I think Dana White at this point, he just doesn't. It's UFC is such a smooth sail. He doesn't really give a fuck about if it gets any better than it already is. So I think Hunter Campbell should, be the new Dana White. And no offense to Dana White, he built the company. He did a great job with the UFC. But his time is fucking. Just like leave, bro. That's all I'm trying to say is fucking leave. We don't care to see you anymore because you don't promote shit, and you don't do anything for the fans. So other than obviously build the entire company, but you can do that shit behind the scenes. Put someone else as like the face of the UFC right now. Obviously Dana, he'd still be doing this shit behind the scenes and being a part of the company, but put Hunter Campbell there, make him the face of the UFC, the guy you see at the press conferences, at the post-fight press conferences, doing all the announcements and shit like that. So I think Hunter Campbell should be the new Dana White. If this statement is true, which I don't think it is, I think Dana is, a part of the contracts, a part of the matchmaking. And he said it himself in that Instagram Live clip that he's going to start matchmaking the UFC White House card. And so, yeah, anyway. Moving on, I am going to talk about that Instagram Live. Dana is going live on Instagram. This was yesterday. He was going to have a big announcement. I was hyped when I saw this when I came home from work, but then obviously you see via Zuffa Boxing. And the reason I put this here is because this is another reason why Dana White should not be, the face of the UFC anymore. This guy, has too much shit going on. He's got Power Slap, he's got Zuffa Boxing, he's got this, and I'm sure he has some other businesses too, but like the guy has too much shit on his plate. The UFC is like a side thing for him right now. It's like a side piece. Zuffa Boxing and Power Slap is like his main bitch right now. So UFC is like the side piece. That's why he doesn't show it as much love. Obviously going on Instagram Live to announce fights instead of like announcing them at press conferences or some like fun shit. He just hops on Instagram Live and does it. So. And he's really focused on this Zuffa Boxing shit. That's all he ever fucking talks about anymore. So I think Zuffa Boxing's taking away, Zuffa and Power Slap are taking away from the UFC. He sees something big in boxing and in Power Slap. He sees it starting from the, ground up and getting huge like the UFC. I'm not hating on him for, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, that's what Dana White sees. He's not that interested in the UFC anymore. And that's why he doesn't promote. He doesn't go to fucking press conferences anymore. He doesn't do the whole 9 yards that I think Hunter Campbell has the, not strength is not the right word, but he has the ambition to go do that stuff, to go promote, to make people hype about the events, shit that Dana White's not doing anymore that he used to do. But now that he's got these new endeavors like Zuffa Boxing, like Power Slap. I think Hunter Campbell would be, the new guy. And I don't really have much else to say. Dana White, sayonara, brother. You had a good run, but we fuck with Hunter Campbell now, bro. Hunter Campbell's Dana, we're good. We have Hunter Campbell now. Shout out if you know that reference. But yeah. Also, where's the UFC 327? We have the UFC 326 in March. Charles Oliveira, I can't wait for that fight week. I'm so excited for my boy to slam out Max. But, where's the UFC 327 announcement? Sorry. I thought this was going to be it, but then I saw via Zuffa Boxing. So, I knew it was about Zuffa Boxing and not about UFC. Where's that April, you know what I'm saying? Where's that April pay-per-view card? I want to know that news. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. This is just a little quick, rant video about Dana White and Hunter Campbell. With the news that came out that supposedly Dana White has nothing to do with matchmaking and fighter pay, which is absolutely bullshit. But thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Please subscribe. Thank you. Peace.